feel like Kevin is on the canvases. When I've had occasion to have all the paintings here at home for a little while, it just feels like Kevin is here. Kevin was always very in touch with that spiritual side of himself. I think that's what Kevin was painting, what he was feeling. It was almost like it was all inside of him. The first time that we went to Kangaroo Valley, he said to me that he heard voices as we were driving into the valley, and it was like this chatter of old people's voices saying he's here, he's home. Certainly with his painting, he just kind of started painting. It was like it had all been just laying dormant, and then all it needed was that one little spark to, give him permission to explore it. Kevin was born in 1965 in Gayndah in Queensland. There were 6 of them altogether. The other 5 were all born in Brisbane, so we're actually not sure why he was born in Gayndah.
Dad would talk about his early life when we were younger in the most interesting little stories. One of the ones he used to like to tell us a lot was that he was so poor growing up that he used to lick the orange juice of other kids' shoes, and that was how he ate his lunch at school. He loves to add a bit of GST to his story, which I think was his way of turning something really hard to talk about into like a fun anecdote.
Kevin's mum actually took the kids to the Woolloongabba police station a couple of days before Kevin's 6th birthday, and they were admitted to care because the family had nowhere to live, and they didn't see the kids at all then until must have been about the end of that year. But their mum died only a couple of months later. She had breast cancer. The dad signed adoption papers for Kevin and his siblings within a couple of weeks of their mum dying. And never really bonded with his foster family. The family had 2 much older children of their own, and they had 2 other children that they had fostered as well. My impression is that it wasn't a loving home.
I think Dad was a rat bag when he was young. I've heard that we're quite similar, although Mum and Dad like to say that I got the worst bits of both of them, so there's a bit of a mix-up there.
I actually went to primary school with Kevin, but he was one of those just annoying little boys. Can't say naughty, but because naughty back then is a lot different to what naughty these days is in school. But he was just one of those niggly little boys that you just didn't really want to have anything to do with. When we actually matched up that Lee had married Kevin, met them socially later on, I couldn't believe it was the same Kevin that I'd gone to school with.
If you could not imagine 2 more different starts to life than Kevin and I.
Every time Dad would retell the story of how they met, Mum got younger and younger. So I think at some point he used to say, I met your mother when she was 9 and I've met your mother when she was 6. But it was probably my mum was 14.
I was in grade 10 at school. He worked at there used to be a BP petrol station just down the road here. He was very handsome. So he started chatting to me. My dad was strict and I was like 14, 15 and he was 18, 19. So there wasn't going to be an easy way in.
Kevin became friends with my son, Scott. My husband used to say that we'd have to start charging him board. He was at our place so often, and I didn't know, but he had his eyes on Lee at the same time, of course. So that's when I first got to know him, was then. I realised he was a bit of a larrikin, as my son was. In getting to know him and what his story was, I was an adoptee and I wasn't told that I was adopted. When I heard Kevin's story and he was fostered and, the loss of his mum when he was so young and the kids, and I began to understand why he was the way that he was, and I realised that he longed for a family. We accepted him as part of our family for a long time, and that's what he was crying out for.
It was love at first sight for both of us, I would say. Yeah. I knew he was going to be trouble though. Yeah. I was under no illusion about that. I knew he was going to be a challenge. Yeah. Life with Kevin was never boring. We went to the exhibition in Brisbane. That was our first official date. And Mum and Dad left to come home sort of when it got dark, and Kevin and I were staying in there for a bit longer. I can remember us being on the chairlift and holding hands, and I looked down and saw Mum and Dad waiting to sort of heading into the train station. Yeah, so caught out holding hands on the chairlift.
I knew that it wouldn't be all easy going for Lee, but that she loved him enough to, see through all that and stick with it.
Growing up, we had a lovely home. I think that was largely Mum was responsible for most of that. Dad was always kind of the fun guy who we'd muck around with and go on adventures with and stuff like that.
Her life was pretty good. Dad coached a lot of the footy teams, or contributed to a lot of the footy teams that I played on. I think that was mostly for the benefits of being around the footy club.
When we first met Kev and his family, we'd only just moved up, and the rugby club had only just started again from going broke years before in the 90s. Because we were in the under sixes side, we were the first ones there. We were setting up, and once our game was over, it was only 8 o'clock in the morning. 8:30 in the morning. Kevin would open the bar at 8 o'clock in the morning and say, "Did you want a drink, Doug?" And I hadn't had breakfast. Kev created a bit of a drama at times when we'd have visiting teams, like brothers coming to visit, and here we are, the under sixes coaches having a beer, watching the under sevens.
I think it was 1996 my wife and I moved up. I'd known who Kevin was when I sort of first moved in. Had a few drinks down at the Leagues Club from time to time, and had met sort of Kevin down there on a casual sort of basis, and we became a lot closer.
Kev and Lee had just built this house, and Kev was going down the road one day in his green Holden ute, and he pulled in, and I'd just planted grass, and he wanted to know what sort of grass, and then he decided that he'd take up gardening.
I'd come across the road, sit out the back of Kev's old shed there, and it was like chalk and cheese. It was suburbia there. You sit out the back here in the countryside. It was fabulous.
He was consistent, but a man of many faces and characters. That's how I would sum him up, and that's what made life enjoyable to be around Kev, because you never really knew what was going to happen next.
There's a lot of things that no one would really want to know about Kev. They'd think I was exaggerating.
He was a good guy, and he could be an arsehole too. There is two sides to him.
Yes.
He's a good bloke. And deep down, if you got to know him, he was always a really nice, genuinely good bloke.
And that's why everyone's just attracted to Kevy, because it's like, you feel him, you know what I mean? It's hard not to want to be around the bloke.
He always had a very deep side to him, Kevin, but that was for a long time. That was a protected space that was really just shown to very few, and even those very few, including me, even those very few, it would just come out sometimes.
My kids would openly say he used to annoy the crap out of them. This last 10 years, the Kevin that I knew prior really changed. I think he stepped up.
I think because of what he'd been through himself, he empathised with people, and he became a good listener to people.
When you have been abandoned and forgotten, I think you don't have that self-acceptance to be able to just be who you are. Kevin was diagnosed, would have been sort of at the very end of 2007 or the very start of 2008.
I remember when Dad was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which he always joked was a condition where he has a big heart because it's full of so much love. I remember that being a really big period of uncertainty for our family.
They decided sort of fairly well straight away that he needed to have a internal defibrillator fitted because he was at risk of a sudden cardiac arrest. That was big to get your head around, because they're basically saying that you need this device for life-saving purposes. And my dad died from a heart attack when he was 49, so all of that was very confronting.
Living with Dad's condition was so frequently and so often spoken about, and it was kind of always there, that you're almost just desensitised to it and it just becomes sort of part of life.
Probably in the early stages, it probably didn't have a huge impact on our lifestyle. Gradually, the condition deteriorated and he started having periods where he would go into AF or atrial fibrillation, and we would have to hightail it into the hospital for him to get cardioverted.
There was one time that I went up to hospital in an acute episode with Dad. It was Christmas Day, and we had been preparing lunch. Dad was unwell. We tried to convince him to go to hospital the day before, but he loves Christmas and really does not love hospital. And he was cardioverted there.
I unfortunately was unlucky enough to be in the hospital one time with him when he had to be cardioverted, and it was very, very scary and very awful to see, because, you know, it's one of those things where they put the paddles on because they're going to stop your heart, and there's every chance that it's not going to come back.
We would hear about these things happening. Regardless of understanding that, you always have this perception that your dad is this like immovable mountain. And to see him in that position was pretty confronting.
Kevin had grown up being told various stories about having either Maori heritage or Aboriginal heritage. But because his mum had died when he was 6 and he had had no contact with his dad, various times we tried to find out information and kept on hitting dead ends. So maybe 2018, I organised a DNA test for Kevy to do, and that came back with a percentage of Aboriginal ancestry.
For Dad, I think a lot changed when he found out. I think it was just about finding something and some kind of history and link and family and that kind of stuff, which he'd never known about.
We had always had suspicions that there was more than meets the eye in terms of Dad's heritage and his upbringing and that family story. I think for me, it probably felt like a bit of a relief. Having worked with a lot of disadvantaged people over the years as a health practitioner, I kind of saw what Dad's life could have ended up like, and then was able to really reflect on all of the work that Mum and Dad had put in to create a life that told a different story.
And then early in 2019, I got a message from somebody who was a DNA match for him. Turned out to be his auntie, Judy. The night before we were meeting Judy for the first time, it was massive. Like, I can't describe for you how massive it was, the emotion on his face.
However,
How are you feeling about the events that have unfolded over the last week?
I don't know how to answer that. Incredibly overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Happy, sad, relieved, gifted, blessed, thankful, grateful. Then my auntie,
You like calling people auntie?
will give me enough information to put a shell around the egg of my family.
We didn't know about our ancestry either. My sister, brother and I didn't know about our ancestors until I was probably 50. We met after Lee, I think, probably did the research and came up with Kevin's mum and myself are half-sisters. I think they were both a little bit nervous about it because we hadn't known about each other's existence until then.
For him, it was finally that belonging, knowing that he had Aboriginal ancestry, and then it was the fact that the people embraced him. We had made contact with different branches of his family, but it had never worked out before.
It meant a lot to Kevin because he had never had family. He didn't know his family. Like, he had his siblings, but he didn't know sort of where he'd come from. And it was really good to see him really embrace it. He really wanted family.
Finally, after nearly 54 years, on the 13th of April, that what I've always believed and was told as a young boy, before I was even 6 years old, that I was an Aboriginal kid. Truly, truly grateful that my forefathers and mothers, my spirits,
Kayanga.
Kayanga from Kangaroo Valley.
In my mind, here, that's when the biggest change came from him. It's incredible how you can find people that you've never grown up with. You've got the same DNA in you, but you've never grown up with them. But then as you get to know them and you talk to them, the similarities of your life, it's incredible.
And I think the outcome of that, Dad being able to reconnect with country and with family, just really profoundly changed who he was and how he moved in the world. You know, we had this confirmation of a story kind of meant like Dad could open a chapter and work on building connections and meaning in his life in a way that he hadn't had previously.
I think it was that security of knowing who he is and where he came from, and then figuring out how he can develop his relationship with his culture.
He was at peace within himself, and you know, up until that time there was always the uncertainty of not knowing who he was or, you know, what he was.
In a lot of ways, Kevin's mum, who died young, had been forgotten, and then Kevin and his siblings were almost treated like they were invisible. So it really was this circle that had gone around and around and around and around had finally linked back up, and it was like that finding Kayanga was that closing of that circle.
I think what prompted Dad to start painting was a combination of things. He'd mentioned that he was curious about it, to see if he could. I don't think he believed that he could do it. And then Grace getting him for Christmas the little, I think it was an artwork book or something like that.
He didn't have the motivation to actually go and get it himself. So I just bought, it was from Amazon, it was a sponge set for doing little dots, and then Mum had got some canvases, and I said, if you want to give it a go, you're welcome to. You might find something out of it, you might not.
And then I think it was that, as well as the timing of COVID. So then instead of spending big hours at work and a lot of time in traffic getting in and out of the city for work, he was working from home and he was working up the shed.
He progressed very quickly. I think it surprised him. It would just kind of happen. There were times where he would sit up the shed painting all day, and when he'd go back up the next morning, he would look at what he'd painted and not really remember painting it. So I think it was very meditative for him. Because he hadn't been exposed to culture, it wasn't so much a cultural experience that impacted his art. I think it was just something that's inside of him. He really, once we met Lloyd, who took him under his wing, then he was able to share some of Lloyd's knowledge and Lloyd's experience.
Mm.
Kevin turned up here one day and knocked on the door and introduced himself, and his story is exactly the same as mine. I didn't have what you call an excellent start to life. I was abandoned by my mum and dad and given to my grandmother. We were told a lie about our heritage. Mum had identified as Maori.
I think there was an instant connection between Lloyd and Kevin asked him that day if he would be his mentor.
For Dad, his art was a way to kind of process things that he didn't have the words for. His ability to kind of pull a story from nothing was how he talked, but he was never a big emotional speaker.
And that's what art does. It helps you to create what's in the back of your mind or what you see. You just put it down on canvas.
Probably the two things that Lloyd was able to influence Kevin, one was his actual technique. So Lloyd, talked to him a lot about the actual paints he was using and the tools he was using and that sort of thing. And I think he also gave him that cultural advice. And that was important for Kevin because he hadn't grown up with all that culture. He didn't have that knowledge of, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So Lloyd was very much a checking point for him.
And I imagine this is the way Kevin would have been doing his work. He was a very easy man to talk to. And what I liked about him is he listened. He would always listen. And he'd fire questions at you.
There was a book talking about water. We did a little digging with Yuin tradition. So it's called Dungutty, which means fresh water in Yuin language. The artist statement that goes with this is sort of looking between the lines of the book and what have you. Yuin people are traditional owners of Walliga Lakes land. For thousands of years they roamed the lower ranges and coastal flats, living off the rich abundance of food around the lakes, waterways and oceans. Water is core to life for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Protecting and managing water is a custodial and intergenerational responsibility. We have this relationship, this invisible connection to water, with spirit, culture, songlines, our dreaming. So it's with that Lloyd's compiled the story that Kevin was talking about, the importance of water to the Yuin people.
Because what you're doing is the two of us come together as one.
I think it was all part of everything that was going on with him. I think he was finding peace with himself. I say that it was peaceful, and yet it felt like we were both strapped into a roller coaster that we had absolutely no control over, and that we didn't know how or when the ride was going to end. We had gone past just needing cardioversion, and he had started having problems with heart failure. This one admission that we had, one of his doctors on their ward round said to him, it might be time for us to start looking at a heart transplant. And I think Kevin and I were both like, what? Because we hadn't contemplated that was going to be the road we were going down. They listed him for transplant in November of 2022. Because Kevin was, he was just over 6 foot tall and a big frame of a man, they needed a heart from somebody, that was that kind of size. So they had prepared us at the start that he would probably have to wait for longer than average for a suitable heart to become available.
That's probably when things deteriorated a little bit health-wise, and things got serious quickly.
There were times where walking from the bedroom to here was tough, and walking from here to the shed was tough.
You could see a kind of sudden and severe deterioration over probably the two or 3 years before he passed away. But
he was so well, we were even looking at photos just the other day, and his skin colour looked totally different to what it did a couple of years later.
It was the 6th of August 2023. It was late at night. Kevin's phone rang at about 10 o'clock at night, and it was the coordinator from the Prince Charles Hospital saying that they had a heart for him and for him to make his way into the hospital. We didn't get to the hospital because Kevin told them on the phone that he had a cough. And I'm thinking, why did she even say that? And then she said, actually, just sit tight for 5 minutes and I'll go and check with the surgeon. I think we were both stunned. And then she rang back and said, that they had decided this one wasn't for him.
I remember that took the wind out of Dad's sails pretty heavily, Mum and Dad, I think. But I don't know, I was just trying to be optimistic, and I was like, oh no, it's all good. Like, that just, the old, it wasn't meant to be, so it's fine. The right one will come up, Because even if he had gone in, there's still a whole bunch of checks they got to do. Once you're in there, they got to triple check 1,000 different things.
Kev had been in hospital for 8 days with the usual build-up of fluid and that needing to be managed. He had become increasingly less tolerant of being in the hospital. I arrived at the hospital at lunchtime and he was really very agitated. It was a bit unusual. It was tumultuous. So we probably left the hospital, I don't know, about 1 or 2 o'clock. And he said to me on the way home that he felt safe when I was there, that he, you know, as soon as he saw me at the hospital, he knew that he was safe, which once again was not Kevy. Like, he had gone from being fiercely independent and he had become very dependent on me. He was feeling a bit nauseous. We had a light dinner and he went to bed a bit early. He woke up and said he needed a lemonade and could I get him a can of lemonade? And I actually roused on him and said, no, I'm not getting you a can of lemonade, and you probably shouldn't. I don't think Dr. George sends you home thinking you're going to have a couple of beers either. At some stage, it was probably about 11 o'clock, he got up to go to the toilet and he was really struggling to walk. And then about an hour later, which must have been about 11:30, he really could, like, I had to help him get to the toilet. He couldn't get back to his side of the bed and he sat down on my side of the bed and he looked me in the eye and said, don't call anyone.
I had a feeling that I shouldn't go to the trip. Spoke to Mum and Dad about it and I was like, I think I need to cancel Italy. And so I said, nope, you need to go, don't be ridiculous. Spoke to Mum and said, if anything happens, you have to promise that you'll call me, because Dad absolutely won't. And apparently Dad had had the same conversation with Mum and said, under no circumstances is Lauren to be contacted and she is not to come home early. It was one of those really weird situations where retrospectively I think, you know, sometimes you have an inkling that something's going to happen.
It rained a little bit and I said to him, oh, that will be nice. The sound of the rain will help you go to sleep. And we were laying there holding hands at, I think probably about 12:30, I just felt his hand going like that on my leg. And when I turned the light on, he was having a cardiac arrest. I actually couldn't use my mobile phone. You know, it was just the panic of it all. And I actually went in to the office and grabbed the landline and I rang 000. There were 6 paramedics in the bedroom and the critical care specialist asked me what Kevin's wishes were, and I said to them that he was on the transplant list, so he obviously wanted to live. But I said, but not if he's going to be worse than he already is. Initially, I tried to ring Jacob because after they'd asked me about what his wishes were, I was concerned that I was going to have to make a big decision.
I don't think the way any of us found out was standard or normal. We had just arrived in Florence. I think we'd been in our Airbnb for about half an hour when my cousin called me. Knowing that it was late in the evening, I answered thinking he'd be, you know, funny, drunk or something, I don't know. And Andrew said that something was going on with Dad and that there were ambulances on the way and that our auntie Jo was on the way to Mum and that I should call Mum, and could I try and reach Jacob and Grace because he had no luck calling them. I didn't believe him the first few times. I was like, you're kidding, you are pulling my leg, there's nothing wrong, I don't believe you, that's ridiculous. We called Mum.
When Lauren rang me, I actually for a moment I considered whether I should not answer the phone or whether I could answer the phone and pretend everything was fine. Like, just briefly, I did.
We'd been at work and up late on the Thursday night. We went to sleep at probably, I want to say 11:30 the night before, and we must have been in the world's deepest sleep because I woke up to something like 30 missed calls, called the first number back, which I think was Grace, my little sister.
Baby was about 7 months at the time, and so I was used to having a fairly hard sleep, and I must have woken up to I think 20 missed calls or something from you, and we have,
wish you wouldn't have known.
Yeah, and we have an intercom at our place, and that's a pretty loud doorbell. Normally you can hear it, but we must have been in a pretty deep sleep at that point with everything that had gone on. I managed to get on the phone with Lauren, and she said that something's wrong with Dad. There's ambulance there, and you put your friend Tiana on the phone. Yeah. And she said that I should probably head out there, which, sorry.
Because at that point I hadn't really known what had happened. I just knew that I had to get here. And so I walked in through the garage and the ambulance people came out to see me because Kevin was in Lee's bedroom. And they said, oh, your sister's out in the kitchen. So I've gone out there, and I thought Lee had said to me they couldn't, his heart's not starting. His heart's not starting. And I'm like, okay, thinking that's what the machine is. And then she said they can't start his heart. And yeah, it was terrible. I think I screamed, I don't know.
I asked them if they were going to shock him, but they said that he didn't have a shockable rhythm. I didn't know that you had to have a rhythm for them to shock it, but apparently you do. So they didn't shock him. So yeah, they worked on him, I think, for about 20 minutes, and then that was it.
He looked like he was asleep, on the floor until we could get the kids. We couldn't get onto anybody. And then all the kids arrived at certain parts early hours of the morning and then later in the morning. And
I let our closest friends know, and quite a few of them were able to come over here. So it actually was probably a lovely, it was lovely that it was in our home and in our bedroom, and it was just all of the people closest to him that got to have that time.
So Dad ruined my weekend off.
And my trip to Italy.
Yeah, he's good for that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he did ruin it.
To meet Kevin.
You would have thought you would have enjoyed Kevin's funeral. You would have thought there'd have been a lot of happiness, but it was actually a really difficult day. A really difficult day, yeah.
At some stage when we were like the year earlier in the year that Kevin died, we had been away and we just were talking about his painting, and I thought we'd make a bit of a list of all of his paintings, and I think we were both surprised at the number of paintings that he'd done. And then when we were planning the funeral, I can't remember how that idea or who that came from, that it would be nice to have some of Kevin's paintings there. So then I got in contact with a lot of because it was a lot of friends that had his paintings, so I'd gotten in contact with as many of them as I could and asked them if they were coming to his funeral, if they could bring their paintings with them. So it was, and that was lovely, seeing them all together. I think at that stage I actually felt like asking everybody for the paintings back, because it feels like Kevin's on the canvas. So that was probably what, where the idea came from initially.
Pretty emotional the day that sort of Lee got all the paintings together to be, the prints to be taken, the photos to be taken to be able to do the prints. Everything was laid out here. There was quite a few of us came and had a bit of a celebration that day. So I know he was very proud of what he did. He liked, to us anyway, to me, he sort of liked to downplay it a little bit, but I know he was very proud of what he did. When he was nominated for a couple of awards and ended up taking one out, and I think he was pretty chuffed about that.
My hope is that they will see the spirit of the man that created those works. His personality is shining through in the artwork.
I think my favourite time I've seen Dad's paintings together was actually when we had a lot of the artwork here in the shed. I think that was probably how Dad feels about his art. It feels homey and like a sense of community. So I think it will actually be quite strange to see Dad's art in a gallery setting, because he was not clean and tidy. He was messy and a little bit chaotic and disorganised. And so I think that it'll be strange to see them on stark white walls and in a really organised way.
When I think about Dad, I don't think about a lot of the early stuff. I think about what he was like in probably the last 10 years. But I just think it's really cool that you can have such a shit start, and if you just keep hammering away at it, and if you've got some good people around you, that seems to be the most important thing, then you'll kind of get through it.
I think just always being there to talk to you, whether you want advice or not. He would always, back when he was working, if he would, be sitting up here on his laptop, you'd come up, you'd say you're having a rough day, and he would stop everything. You were. Sorry. He was really good at being present when you needed him to. You could always count on him to be the focus of his attention for the time that you needed him. So that's what I always really liked.
Massive hole. Yeah, massive hole has been left. Heading on to 12 months now, and I still expect to see a text every Friday. Where's Rick? He used to get him, where's Pete?
That really struck me, yeah. He had been through a lot in his life, yet he was able to continue and step forward and make a life of his own with a beautiful family of his own. A lot of people that I've dealt with over the years haven't been able to achieve that, but Kevin was able to achieve that, and there was just something about him that was just so inherently strong, just in there.
If I had to sum up Kevin's journey through life and his reaching that peaceful, contented phase of his life, I actually would use the phrase "love changes everything," which is the song that I walked down the aisle to at our wedding. He may not have started life with that, surrounded by love, but that was certainly the place that he ended up. And I think that ultimately that's what allowed him to, find peace.